Would you like me to read the housekeeping announcements?
Yes, please.
Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship Grants Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raised hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder that this is a Zoom video conference, and please be aware of your surroundings behind you. All Legal Services Trust Fund Commission meetings and committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then select Enable Auto Transcription. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our program. Are there any public comments?
No, there is no one indicating that they'd like to speak.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move to Elizabeth.
Okay, so I think we can call roll. So I'll go ahead and do that. Novella?
Here.
Ephraim?
Here.
Tony?
Here.
Judge Kristen? Vanetta?
Here.
So we do have a quorum.
Okay, so we can proceed with the next agenda items.
So the next item, I believe, is if you have any remarks you'd like to make, Vanetta?
No, I just want to say welcome for another year. We've had some really great experiences providing great scholarships to, upcoming lawyers. And the program has been very successful. And we're looking forward to another year. So we'll get more information about that today.
Right. So I will give the staff report. So everybody is aware, the 2024 summer is now winding down. We actually had a closing session with our fellows earlier this week. And it was very well attended, and there's a lot of excitement from our fellows. So that was really great to hear and see. We'll provide a formal presentation about reporting and information that we've gathered from our fellows at a future meeting, but I do want to report that we did administer a pre-summer survey with the fellows, and we have a really diverse group of fellows winding up their summers right now. 68% are students of color, 70% are female, and about 30% identify as LGBTQIA. And 11% identifying as a person with a disability, and 4% identifying as a veteran or having served in the military. So we're really excited to be able to, fund these fellows this summer. And we've heard anecdotally that, our partnership with Change Lawyers and the program that they've provided has been really interesting and helpful for the fellows in supporting their work and hopefully supporting their future careers in legal aid. We have deployed an end of summer survey for them. And we will release grantee reporting in the next several weeks. And so at a future meeting, we'll report back with a presentation on all of that. I also wanted to report that we are continuing to engage with our stakeholders about this fellowship program. And we've received overall very positive feedback on the impact of the funding and appreciation to the committee and to the commission for being open to feedback, including adjusting our timeline for the grant making. I think that's been really helpful to the law students, the law schools, and to our grantees. I did want to note that we have, as we all know, there's 2 COAF members, Council on Access and Fairness Committee members, and they will be terming off in September from COAF. And so we will have 2 new COAF members join us for the review period and for our next meetings. So I wanted to just note that and also to thank Novella and Kristen for their service on the committee. And then the last is I wanted to introduce a new staff member, Mara, who's a senior program analyst and will be helping to support the committee's work.
And if I can just add, want to again thank Novella and Ephraim for their feedback and participation. It's a really important process, particularly the feedback some time ago regarding the importance of accessing stakeholders in the process. Legislative stakeholders is really making a difference. So we appreciate your service and welcome, Myra.
And this is committee member Tony's first meeting, so welcome to Tony.
Welcome, Tony.
Okay, so I think, Vanetta, the next item is approving the December 4th meeting minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted.
You have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call?
Novella,
Approve.
Ephraim,
Aye.
Tony, I'm sorry, Tony, I didn't hear.
I said abstain.
Okay, thank
by
you.
not voting.
Thank you. Kristen, Vanetta,
Approved.
motion carries. We have 3 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 abstain, and the motion carries.
All right, you proceed with the next item.
Okay, so our next item is the discussion and approval of the 2025 Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship Grants request for proposals. So I will share my screen with the presentation. One moment. Okay, so this is the agenda for this presentation for our 2025 RFPs. This kind of just walks us through the different topics that were in the agenda item posted with the meeting materials for today. So just as a reminder, Business and Professions Code Section 6140.03 authorizes the State Bar to direct $5 of a $45 contribution on the for legal aid on the attorney licensing fee statements to fund these law student summer fellowships. The statute requires that it be a competitive grant process open to our QLSPs and support centers. There is a funding preference in the statute for fellowships serving rural or underserved communities and that serve clients regardless of immigration status. And as we know, this statute is time limited and is scheduled to sunset at the end of this year. We have been advocating, and the State Bar has made it a legislative priority to advocate for extending the statute to allow us continued use of directing these funds in this way. We have received key support from key stakeholders, including California Change Lawyers, the Access Commission, as well as LAC. We anticipate that this amendment, which is included as part of the State Bar fee bill, will be passed in either August or September. And given our tight timelines around the grant making for this and trying to make our award announcements before the beginning of the recruitment cycle for our grantees, we are opting to move forward with approving the RFP and moving forward with the application process in anticipation of the passage of the amendment. I also wanted to note that currently it's in print to extend the the funds to 2030. And we have also requested that additional funds from this same donation be directed towards funding. So it's in print to extend it currently, and we hope before it goes into effect that we will see an increase in the funding amount. So we will keep you posted on that as we move forward. So here is the timeline for our grant making. As I've mentioned before, and as you know well, we have a very tight timeline for this grant. I've added some items to this timeline in bold that are not included in the memo, just to provide additional context for you all. Again, we assume that the State Bar bill, where this statutory amendment will pass in August or September. And I want to note here where the second arrow is that our fee cycle begins on December 1st, and this is where we collect the bulk of the revenue. The bulk of the revenue comes in through attorney licensing fees in December and January. The fee cycle ends on February 1st, and we are usually able to confirm, the revenue amounts we are able to confirm the revenue amounts by mid to late March. At the same time we are collecting revenue, our legal aid organizations have begun their summer recruitment process for law student interns for the summer. As you know, we've received feedback from grantees that it helps tremendously to know that their summer positions are funded when they're recruiting. It also helps law students make their decisions, especially if they are looking to decide between, a summer at legal aid or a summer perhaps at a private law firm. That will be providing compensation. We've also gotten feedback from law schools that it is important for them to know as early as possible that about funding for their students so that they can appropriately distribute their own limited funds to law students for the summer. So to allow flexibility and not require that we align the award decisions for this grant to our commission meetings. In addition to asking for approval of the RFP today, we will be asking the committee to recommend that the commission delegate authority to the executive committee to approve tentative and final award amounts, and then to delegate to staff authority to redistribute funds if the grantee cannot confirm their fellows or declines or returns funds by April 24, 2025. So you can see that down here in the timeline. So I might just pause there for a moment if there are any questions. I don't see any. Okay. The revenue for these grants are collected through the $45 opt-out donation on the license fee statements. For 2023 and 2024, we collected about $750,000. We anticipate a similar dollar amount for this cycle. As we've noted before, there are no administrative costs allowed, so the entirety of the revenue we collect does go out for these fellowships. We are, again, mirroring the grant period. It will be a May 1st to a September 16 grant period to cover the summer, depending on how whether, a law student goes to a school that has a semester break summer where it's, May through August, or a quarterly system where it may be June through September. We would like to set a deadline for grantees to confirm their fellows by April 24th. So that there's an opportunity to redistribute funds if they aren't able to confirm them. And again, we are recommending grant awards be up to $10,000 per fellow. So $7,500 solely for the fellow's compensation and up to $2,500 for grantee admin. And we would also allow grantees to apply for multiple fellows. And again, we would ask that the committee make an effort to distribute grants statewide. So as you all know, we have a new State Bar Rule 3.860G, and this speaks to competitive grants administered by the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission that requires for competitive grants general selection criteria to include impact, administration, and evaluation, as well as other grant-specific criteria. In reviewing our selection criteria in the past, staff has determined that the existing criteria fits into those categories quite nicely. But you will see on the rubric that for administration, we've attached that to supervision. The goal of that question is to determine how well and whether the grantee organization is able to support and supervise the fellow. And then we've attached evaluation to support, focusing in on the organization's ability to take in feedback and adjust and improve their program for law students as they move forward. Again, funding priorities serves rural populations, underserved populations, and clients regardless of immigration or citizenship status. We will be rating the in each category with the categories exceeds expectations, meets, and below expectations or not addressed. And again, we know that the scoring rubric is just a tool to guide the evaluation and discussion for the committee, and high scores don't necessarily guarantee funding. Once we have our review teams review and score the applications, staff will conduct a comparative analysis for the committee's review and discussion at our December meeting. So I'll turn it over to Mara now to talk through the rubric.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth gave an overview of, there are two subsections of the rubric, the first being selection criteria. And here you can see the 5 different scoring categories for this selection criteria subsection. Each one of these 5 categories is up to 5 points. So the total selection criteria subsection is worth 50 points on this rubric. Next slide, please. Thank you. Funding preferences contains 3 separate scoring criterias, and each one of these scoring criteria are worth 5 points. So funding preferences as a whole comes to a cumulative 15 possible points on the proposed rubric for next year. So as an overview, if we look at the 2 subsections together, the total number of points for this rubric has shifted from being 100 points on the 2024 grant. For the proposed 2025 rubric, the total number of points would be 65 points. And the reason we're proposing this shift is because this year we received feedback that the funding preferences subsection was too heavily weighted. And we had increased this previously from the 2023 rubric in order to respond to committee feedback that it was not weighted quite heavily enough. So by making this adjustment, we're hoping to strike that harmony between the 2 subsections or decreasing the proportion of the overall score that the funding preferences represents and allowing equal amount of weight across the different scoring criterias, of which there are 8, 5 in the selection criteria and 3 in the funding preferences.
And so the application components, this is what the grantees will be completing and what our committee will be reviewing. We will, again, the components will remain the same with the project profile, which is kind of high level information about the request, the project description, which includes all of our questions related to the selection criteria and funding preferences, a project budget and narrative. If they've already selected a fellow, their fellow's application materials, as well as project assurances, which includes additional requirements for our grantees to obtain this funding. We are also anticipating that reporting requirements will remain the same or very similar to what they have been. We will require a final financial report documenting grant expenditures. We're asking organizations to submit evaluations to discuss any changes to their approaches to supporting, training, and supervising the fellow, as well as any kind of feedback or lessons learned. We're also asking for information related to the scope of work that the fellow has performed, and the effect of the fellow's work with the organization. As I mentioned earlier, we are also surveying fellows, and we will continue to do that. We survey them at the beginning of the summer and then at the end of the summer, and hope to learn more about their expectations and experiences and learnings, as well as their future career plans, and then to gather demographic information. That is our presentation, and I've put up on the screen our proposed resolutions, but we're happy to take any questions at this time.
If I can just say, just like to thank the other commissioners and the staff for, refining the rubric. We worked over that over a pretty of years, and we've seen, the different changes that will enhance the review process. I really appreciate that. And so I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I can put the resolutions back up. Oh, and I see Judge Kristen has joined. So again, the resolution is to approve the request for proposals as described in our memos, attachment A, to recommend that the commission delegate authority to the executive committee to approve tentative and final grant award amounts, and then also to recommend the commission delegate authority to staff to timely redistribute grant funds to existing applicant grantees should the grantee be unable to confirm the fellow by April 24th, 2025.
Any other questions? Take and move for a vote.
Yeah, I had a quick question on the weighting change. Didn't quite grasp it, so wondering
Sure.
if you all could explain a little bit. So what were the tweaks that were done and sort of changes the weighting, so I better understand?
Elizabeth, would you like me to
Yes, please.
respond? Yeah. So on this particular rubric, what we've done is adjusted the weight by shifting the maximum number of points available for each scoring criteria. So within funding preferences, there are 3 separate scoring criteria, and we've provided each one of those with a maximum of 5 points each. Within the within the other criteria, there are 5 different scoring areas, and those are equal to a maximum of 10 points each. So by shifting the maximum number of points available to each one of those scoring areas, we've reduced the overall weight of them and impact on the overall score. So proportionally, we've just shifted the maximum amount of points so that it's not weighted quite as high as it was before. I believe before the maximum number of points for funding preferences was 30. So we've cut that in half, but we've also reduced the total number of points on the rubric. So if it's helpful to give a proportion, last year, funding preferences made up about 30% of the overall score. The proposal this year is that it makes up roughly 23.7% of the overall score.
Wow. That's helpful. And so it didn't actually, it doesn't do differentiated weighting within the categories. In other words, weighting between the different categories. It's just it's total weight on the total score. That's it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, that was in response, from our first year's grant rubric, there was feedback that the funding preference didn't feel weighted enough. And then I think we swung a little too far. And the feedback last year was it felt a little weighted too much because, if you didn't score highly in the funding preferences, you received an overall much lower score. So we were trying to find a happy balance, and we hope that this will be it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any other questions, Madam Chair. I guess just a couple of comments more maybe on the implementation side will be just for my recon. Last year was the first time I did it, and I learned a lot, and it was very rewarding as well to kind of see all the great work being done. Is when we go into it, one is realizing that because we're using serves clients regardless of immigration and citizenship status as a preference, sort of there were so many in that we reviewed that didn't get the score, but because they legally can't do it. And so I remember that was a little bit of a quandary, but does help prioritize those that do, which I think is still helpful. And then the other in our conversation, I guess, and I don't recall, and I may have missed it in the sort of how we do onboarding, right, when we go into the reviews, would be sort of conversations on unpacking what we mean by underserved populations, and whether there's priorities even within that, because it's such a big category and can be interpreted to be, well, is this an underserved population versus that? And so any guidance on that will end up being helpful since we're using the same criteria again. So that was it, but it's fully supportive of the process that's been laid out and the proposed rubric and RFP.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. That's real helpful. The calibration sessions were really so useful, right? The kind of sure, Christina, you're raising your hand, to differentiating even the rural areas, underserved populations. Some agencies have full descriptions around immigration, around their demographics. Others, it was leaner. And so we're talking about the more comprehensive the application is, the better it is to be able to make those assessments. So those are actually good points. Okay. Any other feedback?
I just wanted to note that we do plan to hold an office hours for any of our grantees that are interested in applying. And so that is once we release the RFP. And so that I think this kind of feedback we will definitely pass along to those that attend.
Well, I'd like to move to approve the resolution.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Proceed with the roll call.
Novella,
Approve.
Ephraim,
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Judge Kristen,
Yes.
Vanetta.
Approved.
We have 5 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstain. Motion carries.
Okay, well, thank you all for this process. This is the last committee session for some of our wonderful members. Just want to give them opportunity to give any feedback about your experiences or, tips for the rest of us.
So this will be the last meeting for our 2 co-op members, Novella and Judge Kristen. We'll have 2 new co-op members join us for review and for our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, I'll say I really enjoyed being on this committee, especially as someone who has benefited from fellowships. So I could do public interest work, and I think it really does make a difference in terms of like how you decide how you want to spend your legal career, spending time in a community is a great way to understand the needs there and also to just be inspired and motivated to do and contribute more. So I'm really glad that this committee exists. I love that there's funding for it, and I'm excited for all the work you'll do in the future.
Thank you so
Yeah, and
much. Jeff?
Yeah, I just, this is one of the ways that, and a committee that, we brought COAF and trust fund together. And I think, so much credit to the State Bar staff for getting us all together in a great way for both entities to work together toward a common goal. I have learned so much. There's so much work into it, and sadly for some of you, I won't be going too far away because my work on this committee is actually what led me to apply for the Legal Service Trust Fund Commission for next year. And I just got my appointment letter last week. So, but really, this committee is why I wanted to join the Trust Fund Commission, because it really did show how COAF and Trust Fund and other entities can work together to really move the needle forward in this area. So thank you all so much, State Bar staff especially, for getting us all together, because we wouldn't have been able to do this without you. So thank you for that. And I will miss you all.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And it speaks to the, this whole committee was also a recruitment tool. So I would look forward to seeing you and, and serving in other ways. And again, Tony, as far as the commission, thank you and welcome. I hope this feedback is useful to you as you are beginning to, evolve with us as well. And obviously for the staff, you just continue to do a tremendous job. We couldn't do it without you. So great thanks for all of your hard work and your dedication.
Thank you. So I think that is the end of our agenda. We can adjourn early and give back some time to all of you. So thank you all again.
Thank you all. Great to see everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you all.